there, ref. That she got the ball.
Yes, everybody, welcome back to the Irish Hotspur. Nice little week off for Dave and for myself, but we're getting back into the grind, getting back into the dirty business, and things still remain unclear as to whether Ange Postecoglou is in fact the Spurs manager. Some may say if no news are happening, maybe that is good news, but I'd kind of be nice to have some type of clarity on this whole situation. We also have some departures from the Tottenham hierarchy to discuss, plenty of things to get stuck into. We would like, maybe some sort of resolution to all of these things that we'll talk about, hopefully, by the end of the week. But we got some great minds with us, the usual crew. We have Sean, Butler, Johnny, and as well as Sam, the guys that you've gotten very well used to. And, of course, the big Dave is back. Please, everybody, while you're hopping in and while you're joining in, do smash the like button. Get into the comments, please. Let us know your thoughts on plenty of the things that we have to discuss. But we also want to make the best use of your time. If you are a member, though, please, everybody, take a look at the community section or the post section, whatever it is called, and get into the comments there. Let us know any sort of things that might be on your mind that we can discuss for after the show when we cool down and just sort of wrap up the show. But let's get straight into it. We're going to start off first here, everybody, with the news of Donna Cullen's departure from Tottenham, and it is expected to be the start of a shakeup, according to Matt Law at the Daily Telegraph, and they're saying that it could be a far-reaching shakeup. Sources believe that the shakeup could be the prelude to fresh funds being pumped into the club, either by ENIC or in the form of outside investment. Now, Sean, I saw a tweet from you, saying that this was kind of expected, Donna Cullen's departure, but how much influence did she actually have over Daniel Levy or with Daniel Levy and the footballing side of things, and also with the new CEO coming in, Vinay? Is Donna Cullen's departure maybe the sign of a big shakeup, like Matt Law is alluding to?
Well, actually, my initial tweet was all about. I said, "Oh, this has got the this stinks of either a Vinny nuke on his day one or a disagreement in the boardroom about Ange Postecoglou." And then George Bannister, who knows a thing or two, I think, about what's going on, he sort of corrected me and just said, "Oh, now this was planned, long planned. It was her retirement was planned last year. It was." It was just delayed for some reason. I said, "Oh, fair enough." And so I kind of corrected it later and said, obviously I was wrong, because that tweet actually got everyone was engaging with it. And I think two things can be true at the same time, right? I think there can be it can be personally, it can be her decision to move on at a time when there's obviously new direction coming in, right? If it is Vinny's first day or Vinny's first week or very imminently, not that he has the authority to make things happen necessarily by himself. Obviously, board members get voted in and voted out. But, surely with him, and I know Johnny's going to talk more about Charrington, no doubt. He knows more. He's more familiar with him than I am. But those sorts of people coming in with whatever mandate they have from whoever's given it to them, I would imagine that includes just like direction, advice, and consultancy. And so maybe some of that was like, look, now's the right time to send her on her way. If she was due to retire anyway, then maybe now's the right time, because it's a board seat that's being taken up and that's going to be handed out. Vinny's obviously coming in and going to get a board seat. And obviously, I think from how it works in most businesses that I'm familiar with, you need a certain number of, like an odd number of seats on the board so that you can have, a part, like a passing vote, if you like. So maybe that seat was vacated for Vinny. I don't know. I mean, Charrington's a non-exec director, but Johnny will talk about him. But, I just think that two things can be right. She was retiring, so maybe it wasn't that big of a deal in essence. But at the same time, I think that there are definitely things happening in the background. And,
But she had a lot of influence, right? She's been around since 2006. So no matter what, it's a significant departure, isn't it?
Yeah, I think she was obviously his right hand, Daniel's right hand woman. And, his kind of like confidant, I guess, right? And from what I heard back in the day, or not even a few years ago, I was pretty sure that wasn't it Donna Cullen who vetoed Pochettino's return, that she didn't like him or didn't want him. So, maybe if it hadn't been for her, then maybe we'd be in a whole different position right now with Pochettino, with or without a trophy, etc. So she's definitely had influence, and without her at the helm, he might feel a little bit isolated. I don't know what his relationship is like with other members of the board. I'm not that close to that sort of side of the game, but for sure it'll be a big miss or big loss for him if he doesn't have his best friend in the company always telling him that everything he's doing is well thought through and correct. Like a lot of people, a lot of yes men or yes people end up being sycophants to the guy in charge. Without her, I think it's a really interesting step. And judging from the judging from the reaction of the fan base online, it was almost like a mini party. Everyone was like almost singing the "Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead." It was really really surprising how much vitriol she received when, you know, all she really was a PR woman who had a bit of influence in the stadium. So
she failed in the PR department though massively, didn't she? Especially, you know, the last 5 or 6 years, the amount of PR blunders, you know, the club have faced, you know, and that would, you know, if I was listening to We Are Tottenham TV, the ex-Trust guy was on there and he was saying, you know, that was largely her remit, you know, the PR and stuff. She failed massively, and, you know, apparently like she had huge influence, you know, in terms of getting in Daniel Levy's ear and stuff, and they reckon it's going to be a significant departure. And, you know, with this new guy coming in, I think, Johnny, you rave about him, don't you? Vinay coming in.
Well, listen,
I just struggle to understand, you know, getting rid like Donna Cullen leaving or whatever it is, and this guy coming in. Like, what changes are we to expect, you know, at Tottenham Hotspur overall?
I mean,
how does it impact on the field?
I think all of them. In fact, it was interesting, Jack, you said, I'm sure no pun intended, but a big shake-up. Everyone would love a big shake-up. Maybe a shake from Saudi Arabia or a shake from Qatar.
Shake it.
Would be very nice indeed. Maybe shake your money. Anyway, as far as, look, I'm going to keep regurgitating this because I've spoken about it a lot, but go back in March when Cherrington was put on, was named, I said to Sean, this is a major change coming for the club. Why? Cherrington is Joe Lewis's personal banker, a former head of Citibank. He runs Citibank, and 2 of the years he runs Citibank, they were Bank of the Year. He's won awards. He lives out in Bahamas. He's on the board of various influential businesses. This guy's a big deal, right? Okay. So the fact that he's been bought in March was no light little, you know, slide way, some unknown director coming onto the board. The fact that he's representing ENIC and representing his interest, Joe Lewis's interest, or the trust's interest, I think is significant. We've read countless times about interest and how it's all fallen apart, to, you know, Levy moving the goalposts as to valuations. We know Todd Bowley was involved in trying to buy the club. We know we've had conversations with QSI. Levy's got a good relationship with the head. There's been lots of conversations. Now, the fact that Vinay was brought in, again, another massive heavyweight. The fact that, you know, he spent 20 years at Arsenal, okay? And, you know, we shouldn't look at this lightly. Forget about all the noise that's come across from Arsenal. What did he ever do for us? You don't spend 20 years at a club and not do anything, okay? He was very good with fan liaison, something Donna obviously failed at. And his interaction with fan groups and the fan base was very important. The other thing is when he retired, or should I say left Arsenal, he was offered lots of jobs in private equity, mergers and acquisitions in America, in Saudi Arabia, and offered a job with Newcastle. Him coming onto the board along with Cherrington gives massive credibility for anyone now who wants to invest in the club. Here you've got two heavyweights with financial expertise that have credit, you know, enormous credit. And I think, you know, it shouldn't be dismissed. As far as the comments about Vivian, you know, Vivian, the trust is being held by the lawyers. That was appointed in 2022 when he was put into trust in the Bahamas because of what was going on with his court case and the like. But I don't think people should dismiss these two as, oh, this is just bullshit. This is nothing. You don't put these two guys on the board if nothing's going on. They need the money. There's, you know, at least 3 capital intensive projects that need funding. which is the hotel, the extension of Hotspur Way medical facility, White Webs. There's also the property development across from the main stadium, which is now 2 or 3 years behind schedule, which is knocking down all the thing where Chick King is and building like a Wembley Way. These are all massive financial projects. And, you know, for most fans, they ain't interested in those financial products. I totally get it. But you have to understand that if someone's going to come in and buy a 10% stake, they're not going to want to just put it all in bricks and mortar. They want to be part of success. So if they come in and they offer the money, whether it's 10% or whatever it may be, depending what the limit is. If it's someone like QSI, they'll be limited to how much they can put into the club due to the fact that they already own the stake in Paris Saint-Germain. But if they bring the money in, you can expect a percentage of that money to put towards transfer budget. And the other thing is that, as Sean and I have discussed many times, due to Levy's prudence, whatever you want to say about it, we've got massive FFP and PSR headroom, around about 250 million as it currently stands, plus all the money that's going to be coming in now from the
Champions League.
League money. Now 30 non-football events, where before we had 6 to 12 non-football events. And the money that's going to be available, the bonuses from qualifying from the Champions League from all the sponsors. We are now a financial behemoth. So I think that...
Is 10%, just quickly, Johnny, is 10% something that we could actually notice as fans, or is that something that's still quite minor if they were to take that much of a stake?
It depends if it's a rolling if it's a rolling acquisition. And what I mean by that is, you know, you buy 10% and you buy up the rest of the shares, you know, over 3 to 5 years. Look, I'm surmising here, but we know the club need money. We know the club need money for these things, right? And I can't see anyone in their right mind just putting in some money so they can build a hotel, an extension at Hotspur Way and the rest, right? They want to be involved in a football club, and a football club needs a top football team with top players to be competitive, to keep the brand moving forward.
Dave, you've told me that Donna Cullen had a lot of influence over not the transfer budget, but actually more over the wages, right, of the players. Could this be a change of something for the future if, you know, she had that much influence over something like that? Perhaps it could mean players of a higher wage caliber could be coming into the club, or am I getting a little ahead of myself?
No, look, that's just what the supporters, the old sports trust guy was saying on We Are Tottenham TV, you know, that he was like, you know, with Donna Cullen there, you know, the executives were getting the highest in the league, and, you know, we have one of the lowest wage budgets in the league and stuff like that. And he was sort of saying that, you know, she would have had an influence on that to a certain degree. Now, look, I can't sit here and say it's true. I can't sit here and say how much of an influence, but if she is advising Levy, you would suggest, you know, that there probably is a suggestion where, you know, if you want to be financially stable, this is the way you should do it, etc., etc. Look, at the end of the day, you know, with this investment coming in, I've always had my concerns. Are they investing into the brick and mortar? The project around Tottenham, property in London comes at skyrocketing prices, especially when they build it up the way they're going to build it up and stuff like that. Are they actually investing into a football club for the whole project? The operations that we still have to take off the pitch that were part of the stadium build, and you know, also money straight into the squad. And where I'm a bit hesitant, like, you know, if we're getting investment, if I'm an investor, I'm not putting my money in for you to go and gamble on a player with it. That's basically gambling. It's 50-50 whether it works. I'm putting my money into the more concrete options, like having a stake in the hotel and stuff like that, taking money, you know, profits from the hotel and all that sort of stuff. That's where I'll be investing my money. For me, like if it was say a full buyout, then you would hope that they want just the whole thing in general to be successful, you know, success on the pitch, you know, a great area around it and everything else. But, you know, look, I have my concerns. Look, to be honest with you, we've seen changes, this and that at this level and internally over the last few years. What difference has it made? You know, it hasn't made a massive difference, has it?
These guys,
I'll just sit back and wait and see.
But these guys, look, with greatest respect, as far as Donna Cullen's concerned, right? Donna Cullen was leaving last year. Daniel asked her to stay on, right? I knew that last year, but, you know, I didn't think it was worthy of really much of a conversation until, you know, yesterday when, you know, there's a bun fight going on, and there's a power struggle. It all became a bit sort of like EastEnders story, But I would say, look, we can look at it as a negative point of view, but I'm not quite understanding the negativity when everyone's asked for change, and now change is coming. It's the wrong type of change, but you've got to understand that I can't see anyone. Like when the QSI came in to invest in and PSG, the thing that stopped them now, the ceiling for them is they're not allowed to buy the stadium because the Paris Council won't allow them, or they want to pay for it, develop it, make it bigger. They can't do that. There's no money in French TV, football TV, so they need extra things. Look, no one invests, Dave, not to grow. But what putting the money into Spurs, there is lots of massive growth opportunity invested in Spurs, and that is on the pitch and off the pitch. Whether or not it's an NFL franchise coming down the line in 3 to 5 years, or whether it's the women's football team, which can be developed and grow the money. Yes, there is bricks and mortar to make money, but yes, there's also profit to be made running a football team.
Just quickly, it doesn't really matter whether the money was to come in to go in one way or the other, because as it stands, the money has to be found for both. And so if the money was to come in and go towards the property, then that would free up more money that's currently sidelined for the property to come back into the club via clever accounting, and vice versa. If there was more money coming into the club, then they would take the money, or if they were coming into the club, then the money that's in the club could be then taken out to pay for the hotel. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Yeah,
no, that's fair enough. Look, and the thing is, I'm not being negative towards it. I've always stated I'm okay with, all these extra revenue streams coming in. Eventually, eventually at some point you are going to see it, on the football pitch at some point. But I think the timing of it right now, when you have that mini window open, I think this is what Jacob Anderson's getting at here. Remember, for 40 months, big up Jacob. Says, what's up, guys? The clubs need to start planning ahead. Every time a window opens, it's like the club didn't even know there was a window. Definitely need new owners for this club to grow.
Another one.
And Sean, this is something that we sort of discussed earlier on.
What? Did we just have one in January? What?
This is something that we discussed, earlier on. You're seeing a lot of other clubs sort of securing their top targets where there's a lot of interest in. And they're doing that in this mini window. So when the other window opens up after the Club World Championship, then they'll go about fixing the rest of the squad. But they're buying themselves the time and the room to maneuver and get their finances ready to make all this stuff happen. Right now, we're using this window to make changes at board level that we could have made at any point during the end of the season when we were losing games in the Premier League. And we could have made at any point once we won Europa League very, very quickly before this window opened. And this is where the frustrations come in. Although we won a Europa League, and this is the thing, I tried my best to sit back, enjoy the Europa League, and I intended to enjoy it a lot longer than what I actually have done. But just the constant news and the constant changes at Tottenham have sucked me right back into it. I was actually hoping to avoid all these discussions, the Ange Postecoglou discussions, for quite some time yet. But the reality is, it just doesn't stop at Tottenham Hotspur. And this is the problem. When are we ever just going to be settled and actually focus on what we need to do on the pitch to move this forward? There's no better time to capitalise in terms of everything when the stock is high after delivering a Europa League. And right now, we're floundering about why the likes of your Delaps are gone, your Cunhas are gone, and stuff like that. And we're sitting here talking about fucking Donna Cullen. It's unbelievable.
I'm not.
No one wants to, clearly, but we're forced to. That's just the case with Spurs moving very, very slowly. Sam, I mean, that's kind of the thing, maybe the last little statement there from Jacob, and then we'll kind of move on quickly to Ange Postecoglou and Thomas Frank. But Sam, that part that Jacob mentions, definitely need new owners for this club to start growing. Do you have any belief that this could be a summer of potential investment from the outside, that there actually would be a shakeup, around Tottenham Hotspur, or have you heard this all before?
I mean, maybe I'm imagining things, but wasn't it 2 years ago they said that there was going to be, they were looking for investment outside, inside and outside the club, and
Rothschilds.
We've seen nothing from that. And there was a comment earlier on in the chat, right at the beginning, that was saying about Levy, was there any truth to Levy potentially stepping aside? And it's like, I've also heard that for 3, 4, 5 seasons in a row that like Levy was going to start leaving football decisions to the football people. And yet, as much as I'm excited by the prospect of bringing in these people who actually understand how to, make supposedly successful football clubs, we're still bringing in executives rather than bringing in football people. For me, I'm not in touch really with the financial side of football. I'm a fan, right? Not that you guys aren't fans. I just like football for football. At the end of the day, I get sucked into the Twitter threads where everything's the worst thing ever until it's the best thing ever, and we see all these rival teams like Man United, who everyone told me was broke, for example, and they're filling Heinz bottles with Timu ketchup to just cut pennies wherever they can. And yet, they're going to go and drop 150 million before we've even decided whether we're going to keep the manager or not.
Yeah.
So for me, I kind of just want to wait and see what happens. Every season, I think the same thing. Every window is, okay, this window, I'm not going to get sucked into the transfer merry-go-round and whatever. And, already I'm pissed off about clubs getting targets that I was interested in. But, we still can't even pull our finger out and decide, as I said, who the manager is going to be. And we're changing board members. As you say, it could have happened all throughout the season, but we want to do it when we should be trying to strengthen, when all the other clubs around us are strengthening. And the biggest thing about, being a European champion, which we all are, is that we heard that this was going to, push us forward and develop us as a club. And look, maybe it will. But so far for me, I haven't seen anything that suggests that is going to happen yet. Anyway.
Man United are the team acting like they won the Europa League and are
in
the Champions League at the minute in time.
Well, they even went as far as having a bus parade as well out there in Asia. Don't think we didn't see that. That was embarrassing.
Thank you so much, though, Jacob. 40 months as an elite member, very, very, very generous over a huge period of time. So thank you so much. You've grown a lot with us, that's for sure. And then also Eddie wanted to come in here, I think, as well, Dave. And Eddie was saying, what is happening with this club at the moment? There hasn't been a statement if Ange is staying, still under contract and all. Big up, guys. Thank you. I've made so many friends, and thanks to you guys. Thank you, Eddie, man. Very, very generous support. We're going to now. Yeah.
So what you're saying there, Jacko, is that if they're not sacking Ange Postecoglou or they're keeping him, there doesn't have to be a statement. I think that's basically what he's getting at.
Do you agree with that?
Or
do you think the speculation that fans are having as well as journalists are having is justified?
Do you know what it is? Look, the media are always going to print stuff and stuff like that, but I think there was a couple of opportunities, especially in the match day program against Brighton, for Levy to sort of confirm Ange's future without actually having to come out and make an official statement. Because if the club come out and make an official statement, it means they're paying heedance and paying to all that noise that's been created all this season. And then where does it stop? All of a sudden, you have to come out and make statements for everything to the media. It's a tricky slope to go down. So I don't think you're ever going to see them actually come out and make a statement, because at the end of the day, it's them that's put the pressure on. Internally, they kept with the guy. You know what I mean? But what I will say is the fact that they didn't go to say, we're looking forward to all of us into next season, with Ange and whatever else, it's buying them time. And the longer this goes on, the more time they're buying themselves. And you can only imagine that with the time they're buying themselves, they're out there exploring other avenues, other opportunities, or they're leaving themselves open for an agent to contact them and say, look, this guy's potentially interested. You want to have a conversation and stuff. So that's where I'm at. And I think the longer that goes on, I think the more the decision is already probably internally being made that they're going to get rid of the guy. But I also take Sam's point, they don't have to come out and clarify anything. On the flip side, if they don't have him under pressure inside the club.
Well, he's under contract. Why would you make a statement, that he's still going to be the manager for next season? That would be a silly thing, to say, because then it would be suggesting that you were actually looking, in fact, at other managers, or you were maybe getting your eyes turned, towards someone else. So they don't have to make any statement of any kind. Maybe what we need is for Ange Postecoglou to return back from his Greek vacation and just, see if he's not been locked out of the training facility, or if they haven't changed the keys or anything like that.
I think Lee Judge has done a show earlier on today. Someone sent it to me, and he sort of came out and said that the decision has been made, Ange will go, and that, he's got it from a very reliable source, and there seems to be more and more people saying the same thing.
Nothing's changed.
It's usually with sources, sometimes there's variations of what people are saying, but in general, when people are saying, I've got this, it's very, very consistent.
The media, though, right, for a few months, like even before we even got to the Europa League final, we're saying he's getting sacked no matter what. He's already going to be out the door, even if he wins the final. So you wonder if they're doubling down on that type of rumor that they've been kind of putting out there, been spewing for a bit of time here. So I guess we'll find out, who's right. Yeah, go in on that.
It's just, well, first and foremost, like some seriously senior journalists, like that work for the Telegraph, like Matt Law, Ali Gold, all these guys that sort of are somewhat, that have connections. They've all posted things saying that there's been several meetings with Thomas Frank, for example. Right. Other people said that we sat down with Inzaghi, as did Newcastle, which I found bonkers that Newcastle would. But like, if those sorts of journalists that are usually somewhat in the inner circle at Tottenham are saying that, then I think that there is a justification to come out and clarify, because once it's getting to that world, if it's not if it is true, it's not true. Even not just for our benefit, but for Ange's benefit, there should be some sort of clarification. And I think on the other hand is that if it was always if it's true that these things have been known for a long time by people, then why the hell are we at the stage where we haven't had conversations before now with, like, what you're guilty of? What might happen here is you end up sacking a guy, but then you don't have any plan in place. It's going back to that guy, whoever it was, who made the comment like, the super chat that said, it's almost like we didn't realize there was a window coming up. And I feel like this has happened before. Like when we went 60 days, we did it with
Nuno.
We did it with Nuno. We did it with this guy, with Ange, right? Like it was a long time between Conte leaving and Ange coming in. And I just feel like this again, reeks of amateur hour from the board level, who like they want a £4 billion valuation on the company. Act like a £4 billion company. You don't get FTSE 100 companies that don't have contingency plans, and that they're valued around these sort of price points. And I just think that how can you get this far after the final game and not have made your mind up, and B, also if there was nothing to ever say, then at least come out and say it. Like, we have fallback, we're fully behind the manager, just to end this speculation. He's staying. And if that's not the case, then why is it that we're at this stage already and we don't even know if we've figured out which new manager we want to bring in? Like, where were these conversations over the last 6 months?
It stinks of like there must be like a million committees or something that are being made, just to make one decision, and instead of just one guy just putting his foot down and just declaring what they're going to do, it seems like they're all just talking and talking and talking and talking just endlessly without any actual decision being made. Or they're not talking at all. It just seems like nothing is just getting done.
That's not true.
On any front, whichever way the decision is going, however far they're through the shortlist of the managers, all this stuff, the fact that there's nothing clear now, it does. I don't care what the outcome is. It's still an embarrassment. It's still an embarrassment.
Previous summers. It's very similar to previous summers. You're right. But John, what am I wrong about?
No, what they're waiting for is Spurs Talk Show's poll. Sean has done many polls, and they're waiting for the final poll. They're running up the nubs. Yeah, it's swinging left and right. It's flipping, flopping left and right. The board are monitoring his polls, and they'll make the decision. I reckon Thursday or Friday is what I was told. Look, listen. As far as I mentioned to Sean about something to do with Thomas Frank a few weeks ago, not before the final at least. Look, I think the thing is here, does his contracts, the only thing I'm thinking of, a lot of the contracts go to July the 1st, as we know. Hence the reason why Real Madrid coughed up £10 million to get Trent out of his contract. There might be a small trigger clause, that if Spurs sack Ange before July the 1st, he'll be entitled to bigger compensation than if he was sacked after July the 1st. That's the only thing I can think of that could be an anomaly, because there's normally tiny little things in contracts which seem insignificant until they're relevant.
Just ask Johnny Cardoso.
And also,
There you go.
The thing is, there's that much of a media witch hunt on for him. It almost feels like he's never, ever going to escape it. Even if Tottenham come out and confirm his future, they're still going to go after him over every little defeat, every little thing he says, because they don't like someone that's proved them wrong. They've ridiculed this guy. They've mocked him. They've questioned him, questioned how good he is. He's gone and delivered. They mocked him when he said, I always win in my second season. He almost brought, they brought him to that point. They made him get what they wanted out of him, that punchline. They were going to sit there. They're holding his feet to the fire. Then he delivers a trophy. They're never going to let that go. He's made a show of them. That article that comes out before the Europa League final, you're either going to be a hero or a clown. Do you know what I mean? Again, that media witch hunt, it's incessant, and it almost feels like, it also adds to the own goals that we also commit. We're sitting here in a transfer window doing board structure changes and all that sort of bullshit. It just adds to all the noise around Tottenham.
That would be there. That would be there regardless of whether Ange was here or not. I mean, if we knew Ange,
if you've got a new manager, that side of the speculation sort of. It really dampens down a lot.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I think there's also, if you don't mind me saying, a massive witch hunt for a guy who's not even our manager yet. I mean, he's been hung, drawn, and quartered. Listen, we know it. Come on, he's been hung, drawn, and quartered. The poor guy. He's probably reading it. He goes, "I'm not even taking the job. I'm not even taking. No one knows."
That's what we do to managers, though, don't we? We do it to every manager. Done it to every manager since Pochettino. Why should Frank get a pass?
Look, for the good,
we've got to be consistent, hold our standards. Isn't that what people have been preaching all year? Standards.
No to Gattuso.
Hold them right across the
board. For Ange.
No to
Ange. Yeah, listen, for Ange moving forward, he can't lose, right? If he leaves here, he leaves high. If he goes to another job and has a shit first season, he'll just say, I always win in my second season. You can't sack me. And they won't be able to sack him. But for every manager that comes into the club, he's going to be compared to the first 10 games. And then in his second season, he's got to win a trophy. So, they're laying down foundations. He's laid down the foundations. And I don't think whether he stays, Ange stays, or someone else comes in, there's always going to be question marks. And there's sort of parameters that have been set and benchmarks to be broken. One thing a new manager won't be doing, he won't be breaking the 22 games defeats. 22 EPL defeats. I don't think we will ever see that again. And if we do, I won't be on here talking about it.
Breaking records, Ange, no matter what.
I can tell you what they also might not do is deliver another trophy at Tottenham for quite some time as well. So, we could also have that debate. But look, let's take this from Drew Zilla here. Then we've got one from Shawnee Mannix. And then we are actually just going to delve straight into it, the whole link with Thomas Frank. And in general, what do the panel want? Do they want to give Ange into next season or do they not? Yeah. We got this from Drew Zilla, member for 21 months. Says, smash the like for the show, everyone. Big up to Dave, Jack, Sam, Johnny, and Sean. Don't forget to subscribe to all these channels. Big up, Drewski. A great contributor to the Spurs community and a lot of the shows that the Spurs community put out there. So big up, Drew. Good to see you. And hopefully you're still enjoying your moment. I have no doubt you're driving in and out of work every day singing Johnson again, ole, ole. But big up, Drew. We've got this from Shawnee Mannix for Eddie. Should we sign Jack Harrison? Hey, that's a private joke.
Maybe if we lost the Europa League, that would be one of our summer targets. But we got to aim a little bit higher there, Shawnee. Appreciate you though, man. Thanks for the love and support, and as well as to Drew. Let's get into it here, boys. The likes of Ben Jacobs and Fabrizio Romano have come out this week saying there have been multiple meetings between Thomas Frank and Spurs have already taken place. A decision on Ange Postecoglou's future is expected later this week. Also, Marco Silva, according to Fabrizio Romano, is also highly appreciated. There's been internal discussions as for the options that Spurs will take if Ange does get fired. No decision has been made on Postecoglou yet. To you, Sam, since we haven't heard from you in a bit, Ange Postecoglou did allude to being back for a third season. He's saying the third season's the best one. Do you think the Spurs hierarchy are in fact split on his ability to actually compete on all fronts this next season? Do you think there is a bit of split in the hierarchy?
Is that for me?
Sorry. Did I say Sean? I meant Sam. Sorry.
It's interesting because I don't know. I mean, you look at it. You look at the facts, right? On one hand, you've got wins the first trophy for 17 years, the first European trophy for 41 years, or whatever it was. And I don't say whatever it was to do down the credit. I mean, look, I've got my flag across my headboard on my bed, my scarf across my headboard, my Bilbao scarf. And you know, he gave me one of the best days of my life. But at the same time, he's given me probably like some of the worst 18 months I've also ever experienced.
Yeah.
He's kind of like that older brother, right? Who talks a big game about how he's always going to look out for you. And every time, you know, a bully at school starts pushing you around, he just sort of like looks and walks away. And then finally someone around his size comes and he's like, yeah, I'll beat them. And, you know, he's given you one moment. And for me, a lot of Spurs fans have kind of latched onto that. And I'm not here to say that you should or you shouldn't latch onto that, because again, like he is the most, well, he's one of the most successful managers that we've had at the club in terms of what he's won. But he's also arguably the worst manager that I've ever seen. And a lot of people have experienced. You know, I'm 26, so you know, I came in kind of watching it around Harry Redknapp, and I've seen us buy a lot of shit players.
Yeah.
And our squads have been, in my opinion, worse than what they are now. And you know, I've heard Johnny say the point quite a lot, to basically say that you sacrifice the league from January, for me is a terrible excuse. I get it. You know, he made.
Was that not what fans were
gambling.
asking for last season, though, Sam? When we went out in the Carabao Cup to Fulham and Ange made changes for that game, many people said, you got to prioritise cups. That's what we want delivered. Now we delivers that. All of a sudden, they switched the goalpost to now the league matters. Although many Spurs fans for 6 years, if not longer, you know, across all socials said, we don't care about the league. We want to win trophies. He's done that. And now all of a sudden, the goalposts are shift again.
I agree with that, Dave, right? However, I just can't overlook 22 losses. There's two factors that I just can't overlook, or three factors I can't overlook. And I've been banging on about it probably since I came on the podcast for the first time. I don't back his system because I can't get behind defending with two defenders and still not creating that many chances and just being open every single time someone hoofs a long ball up the pitch to their pacey winger or striker. 22 league losses, 38 losses or something since 2023 in November. And also for me, and I feel like it's kind of been forgotten about because, and I'll admit, he did suck me back in a little bit towards the final when he was talking about the media's like agenda against Tottenham. Oh, you just hate them because they're Spurs. You really don't want to see them do it. Which you know, I've been waiting for a manager to say that for pretty much my whole life, right? Someone in the club to come out and actually call it out. But what I think a lot of people forgot was the ear cup to the fans at Chelsea, and for me, that really strained my relationship with him, because I can't overlook that. You know, you need to be bigger than the scrutiny. I get it. We're all humans at the end of the day, right? But the fans who are going there to every game all the time, you know, paying their money, paying the third or fourth highest tickets in world football or something stupid, and having to sit and be told that, you know, we're sacrificing the league. But not only that, I don't want to hear your criticism or make your criticism as loud as your praise, or whatever the expression is. For me, I think that I'll love him forever for what he did for us, you know, giving us that trophy. I've been absolutely abused my entire childhood and early adult life by all my fans living in North London, my friends who are fans of Arsenal and Chelsea, etc. But I think, and as much as, you know, we hate Chelsea, and maybe their model isn't the most sustainable because they do yo-yo between winning a trophy and dropping to like 10th, but they've consistently won trophies. And I know that maybe they're not the greatest example because they basically have spent and ignored every rule possible until the door was closed behind them. But I just think that, you know, we talk about being a big club, and I think that big clubs have to make decisions, and losing that many games in a season and only being able to focus on one cup is not a big club mentality for me. And as much as I don't necessarily think that Thomas Frank is the guy, and I'm not desperate for Ange to leave. I think that he should leave. Is my sort of end point.
For me, Sean, and the rest of the panel, I'll go to you now, Sean. I mean, I just wonder if this split amongst the hierarchy does have to do with this next season. Can he compete on all fronts? He's shown that he can prioritize one competition over another. First season, he probably surpassed expectations, got us 5th. I think a lot of people were saying 8th and 9th and 10th or something, in his first season. Regardless of what you want to say about after the first 10 games, he did still get 5th. The next season, he took us to a semifinal and was able to win us a cup. But I think it's probably, about can he actually deliver on all fronts next season? Can he actually finish respectably high enough in the league, but then also still push really hard for a cup at the same time? And that's still probably up for debate, right?
Well, it might be up for debate, but all the evidence suggests no, he can't, right? Like, that's the reality is, like, he's a cup guy. He got us to a semi-final in one this season, got beaten by the best team in Europe, or one of them. Fair enough. And he got beaten, and he took us to the promised land in the Europa League. Look, if we were in a Europa League, or if we were in the Champions League final next season, there's probably no manager I'd rather have than to give the pre-match team talk. But unfortunately, there's 38 games in the league we have to navigate, and the evidence for me is pretty clear that the first 10 games in the first season, which got us 26 points, was in a period where it wasn't who we were, mate. It was no one knew who we were, mate. And that's the reason why we kind of caught everyone by surprise a little bit with the unique system. As soon as it was figured out, it's been downhill pretty fast ever since. Yes, I know it's never black and white in Tottenham, right? Like there's always going to be a split in the fan base, split with the hierarchy as well, because the story is it's so like the two arguments couldn't be more polar opposites. Like, if you want to focus on the Premier League, then it's a clear sacking. If you want to focus on the cup, it's a clear keep.
Right.
And so it's very difficult to land, just your personal persuasion of what is more important to you, and how little importance do you place on the other side will make you land where you land. For me, I land on the idea that, look, you're not going to be playing in the if we were playing in the Europa League again next year, I think, okay, maybe give them a go, because I think that we can recreate it again. But the fact we're not, I just think that the leveling up of the competition, I think that the fact that we're behind the 8 ball with the squad, already, and whatever's going on in the board, and none of us know really what's going on in the board, but whatever is going on in the board, if that's going to continue to drag itself out, then we might be scratching around for bargain basement support towards the end of the summer. That's going to be a problem for any manager. But I haven't seen any evidence in the Premier League for me to feel like, other than the first 10 games, where, as I say, I don't think it was, I'm not dismissing it as an irrelevance. I'm just saying that in bringing it into its relevance, it's no longer relevant because his system wasn't figured out. Then it was unusual, unknown, and we caught people asleep and unawares. But now it's been figured out. He's going to have to fundamentally shift his tactic to be able to be less predictable. He did that in the Europa League, but I don't think that you can, park the bus your way to in the Premier League, and I don't think that you can do the other version. I think you need more kind of balanced styles of play and more adaptability in the tactics, and I just don't think he has that. Well, I haven't seen evidence that he has it, and so for me, that's where I hope that the club land. But again, I'm with Sam in as much as I'm not Ange out unconditionally. I'm Ange out as long as we can get someone else in. And where I'm with Dave is that I don't land on this notion that Thomas Frank is a massive upgrade, and so I don't want to take the risk of the disharmony and the disruption to the continuity of a happy dressing room, because I think there is a happy dressing room there, to make a sideways step. It has to be a forward step and a significant improvement in the quality. And I'm unconvinced by Thomas Frank. I think that there's a lot of unknowns with him, that therefore, unless it's someone significantly better, I'll be okay with whatever decision the club makes.
I think a lot of people would agree with those final points you made there, but I'm not sure if Johnny does. Johnny, how do you feel about, what is the board split over? Aren't they split over that? Like, whether he can actually compete on all fronts next season? I imagine that's the big conversation.
Look, are we seriously saying, right? I hear what he's prioritized. Okay, so but can you not prioritize a cup without losing 22 games, without finishing with 22 losses, 17th finishing with 22 losses, the most in Premier League history without going down, 10 home game defeats, the most in our history, 34 league defeats in 2 seasons. And can I ask a question? Do we not think that our defence, I personally think I'll go through them. Cuti Romero, top defender, in my opinion, right? Mickey van der Ven, Pedro Porro, Destiny Udogie, Jed Spence, Danso, right? Vicario. I think that's it. I think that's a good defence. And yet we're looking at 65 goals conceded last season, the second most in our history. You know, these aren't things that should be or can be ignored. And why I understand there's such a thing as a prioritising a certain event. Prioritising something should happen over a small period of time towards the end when it's this or that. You can't claim you prioritised when you've had 22 defeats in a season. I'm sorry, it just doesn't wash. And 65 goals conceded with what I consider to be probably our best defence.
Yeah, but Johnny, just quickly on that, mate, the amount of goals conceded. Yeah, but just to clarify, mate, the amount of goals that we conceded with that back four was far fewer than 65.
What?
The amount of you saying that we conceded 65 goals with that defence, we didn't concede 65 goals with that defence.
Well, all right, if you want to be pedantic about it, right? If you want to say with this all right, okay, when this one wasn't missing and that one wasn't missing, well, you could go back through the annals of history and say the same. This is the second most amount of goals we've ever conceded as a club, right?
Yeah, but there's a statistic that when those back four and Vicario played in gold, played the back five, that we won 75% of the games, 80% of the games.
All right, let's add some more context to it. Look at the games that those were against. Right.
Yeah, the point you were making that we conceded 65 with that defence, we didn't concede. We conceded 65. A lot of those goals were conceded with Archie Gray. And listen, I'm on your side with regarding Ange out. But if you look like the point is a little bit, you're twisting the point of the fact.
Stevie Fraser is saying he only lost 3 games with a fit back five.
We lost 3 games with the back five. Really? Right.
Look, what I will say
what about last season? We lost 34 games, guys. 34 games in 2 seasons. 34 league games in 2 seasons. Come on.
No,
look. It's not a blip. You know, I hear the injury thing. I sympathise. I empathise with the injuries. I really do. But you can only have that argument for so long. You know, I didn't hear Iriola bitching and moaning about half his squad being out, which it was. Yeah. He tried to find it. Listen, he doesn't have as many luxury players as Spurs have.
No, but he had one competition to focus on.
I understand that, but Ange had one competition to focus on when he had 41 games only, and he still had all those losses. You know, we lost 5 of our last 7 games last season, right? And the only 2 games we lost out of those 7, one out of those 7, were against relegated Burnley and relegated Sheffield United. You know, I listen, I'm not making the stuff up. It's just there. It's there. What can I do? What can I do? Listen, if Ange says, I said to Dave earlier and to Sean earlier, if the board decides that Ange is the man, right, I will hope we start the season and he starts well and he carries on in the thing and I will back it. But personally, I don't think so. And what I think is a greater danger is going into this season, giving him a huge budget, if there is a huge budget. Now we're in the Champions League. He spends the money on more Brennan Johnsons and Dom Solankis, and we end up in a situation come November, he has to get the tin tack. He leaves. Then we're scurrying around. And you think we've got a trouble now finding a manager? Try finding one in November that's worthwhile, that isn't in a job or who is in a job that we have to try and get out. And now, unfortunately, we don't have Ryan Mason to fall back on this time. God knows who it could be.
Do you know what? Look, I understand, you know, everything around Ange Postecoglou, but I think, you know, in order for me to get where whatever side of the argument, I have to take in everything that's happened. Injuries take a massive toll. To Sean's point, when you have your best back line out there, we win more games than what we lose. When we have to start rotating and put in other players, we end up losing a lot of games. Now, that brings me on to the next point. The next point people have made all season long is this squad is so much more better than what it's showing. Maybe a little bit better in the league than what it's shown, but how much better to the aspirations of we're going to be challenging with it? No. Nowhere near it. At the end of the day, this squad has been tested more than ever before, than any other season I've ever been a part of. It's been tested the most. And the reality is, the answers we've got back, it's not good. It's not as good. They also have to take a piece of the blame. But a lot of players in years gone by, they sit around moaning, not getting my chance and everything else. Okay, they've been given chances this year. Did they take it? No. But no one's sitting there blaming the players. They're giving them a free pass. I'm not willing to do that. They also take a massive part of the blame. They have to. So which then does not subscribe to the notion that this squad is so much better the way people make it out to be. Also, when you have the amount of injuries that we've had, and at one stage we had 7, 8 first-team players out, you take a massive hit. Also, we sit here and talk about if we keep Ange, we're going to get relegated next season. Let's not forget, when the decision was made inside the club, it's clear that it was made. The decision inside the club was made to prioritise Europe and kill two birds with one stone, deliver a trophy and get the monkey off the back, and also secure Champions League football. At that point, we were never, ever going to qualify for Europe during the league. Absolutely never, ever, and we were never going to get relegated. So for me, I think that talk, if we were just to focus on the league, like some of the names that have been pouted around this season, Iriola, Thomas Frank, Ange would have done better. When he focused on the league last season, he finished fifth. He finished fifth, despite the narrative people want to paint last year. He finished fifth. And despite people, questioning, is he good enough in Europe, against all these other coaches, who are tactically more adverse and stuff like that? He bet them all.
Dave, do you remember when we had that conversation? I don't know if you remember Southampton at home, right? Southampton at home, right? Where this team couldn't be there. It took to almost the last kick of the game, a penalty, wasn't it? To beat them. Literally the last kick of the game. And I spoke to you and we said, oh my God, it was absolutely diabolical. That is the only win in their last 12 games.
I'm not finished.
12 games. Sorry, mate.
No. Look, I understand, right? Now, they're all the points that I make for Ange Postecoglou. However, to your point, to Sam's point, the football this season has been very unenjoyable. That's why I've needed a week straight away from absolutely everything, because you're so up one minute and you're so down the next minute. It's been an absolute roller coaster, and I'm not a guy that can have my emotions all over the place like that. I need a steady Eddie, that sort of thing. And
got the wrong club,
that drove me mad. But I came into this season already with the perspective of the transfer window. This squad is not good enough to compete on multiple fronts and meet the Spurs fans' expectations. So that's why I've probably given Ange a bit more leeway. Now, the thing is, right, Ange hasn't demonstrated over 2 seasons that he can compete across multiple fronts. That is now the expectation of Tottenham Hotspur moving forward into next season, now that we've got that trophy. That's the expectation of the fan base. He hasn't demonstrated that. So it is a huge risk going in with him next season. But what I am not prepared to do is anybody but Ange. And that's what I've seen happen with this whole Thomas the Frank engine thing, right? Where people almost all season long have spoke about maintaining standards. 34 defeats is unacceptable over 2 seasons. And then I go and look into Frank and how many he's lost over 2 seasons. He's lost 33 games. So we're saying one less is acceptable. I mean, no, it's not. We talk about Ange Postecoglou, his CV. They diminish what he's done everywhere else. But then we've promoted the likes of Iriola and Thomas Frank, who also have a worse CV than Ange Postecoglou and no trophies on it, by the way. So what I'm not about to do is just get anybody in this door. I don't care about the whole Ange Postecoglou situation, quite frank. The club is going to survive and move forward. It did after Harry Kane, and he added more to this football club than anybody. It's going to move forward regardless of what decision we make on the manager. I care about what is best for Tottenham Hotspur. And if we're talking about needing a massive overhaul on the pitch, and we're talking about competing all 4 fronts, you need a certain caliber of manager to do that. And the likes of Franks and Iriolas, who have not demonstrated that anywhere they've been, is a bigger risk going into next season than keeping Ange Postecoglou. So until someone comes to me with a name of gravitas, or a name that I wake up and go, fuck me, got a rage on, I need to go and jerk it off, come back, that's the sort of name where I go, do you know what? I'm okay taking the risk, move forward. We're in safe hands. What I'm not prepared to do is sit here and take a sideward step, a backward step.
Yep.
All the things that people have berated Ange Postecoglou about, them saying people are now making excuses for Thomas Frank and why he should get the job on the same thing. If we're putting one expectation on a manager, follow through across the board. And that way we'll actually get to a name that will take this football club forward.
Get your stiffy managers into the chat, everybody. Get your managers that give you a stiffy into the chat. I'm going to pass off some of these to you guys. We do have some super chats we have to get to, and also well over 500 people in the house right now also listening to us.
700 across all platforms.
So please, everybody, do smash the like and get into the comments. We have Dermatron joining us saying, big up everyone on the panel. Come on, you Harris Army. Come on, you Flat Cap Army. Come on, you Spurs. Dermatron, some people are saying there could be outside investment happening this summer. I know that was something you were banging on about all season long. Maybe the Dermatron, the ITK, could end up being right. And then Eddie kind of saying what you guys have been saying for a while here. I know Sean was saying it. I think Dave is on the same page as Sean as this, as well as Eddie, saying there's context to all the losses and the sacking of the league. Bring me a manager better than Ange, and I'll fly him back to Australia myself. That'd be a pretty expensive flight over and a pretty expensive flight back, Eddie. But a lot of people seem to be making this point that as long as the manager is in every sense better than Ange or has a better CV than Ange, then people are happy to move on. But if it's kind of a bit up in the air, if it's more of a debate about whether they are in fact actually better, then people kind of would rather just give him, this third opportunity.
And who's better,
third
Jack?
Chance.
Who's better, right? Like, I by the way, Dave, absolute mic drop, mate. I agree with everything you said. I thought it was brilliant speech. I'm with you on that. Like, I'm with you. Anyone but Ange, no chance. Someone better than Ange, 100%. And now I'm leaning into, okay, what does that look like, right? Don't bring me a problem. If Ange is the problem, Ange out isn't the solution. Someone else in is the solution. Who is that? I go, okay, well, on my list of shortlists, there was Inzaghi, who's going to Saudi. There was Glasner, who said he's 99% staying. There's Edin Terzic, who comes with a whole load of unknowns as well. Not done it in the Premier League. He's a control freak. He's got, lots of issues with his own, and he's not necessarily a stylish manager. He's quite pragmatic generally. Bit boring for most people. You have Xavi, who, I'll take him. I'll roll the dice with him, but he hasn't done it in the Premier League. We don't know what he's going to be like. And then you've got Iriola. No, for the same reason. I've never really been a massive fan of him. Thomas Frank, not interested really. Marco Silva, hell no. So I'm sitting there going, well,
did he flop?
No, I'm not saying I'm definitely not Ange in. Mate, you know what? I'm a protractor, mate. I'm looking at all the angles, okay? This is what I sit there and I think...
He's got splinters, guys. He's got splinters.
No, it's not. You have to look at both sides of the argument.
Protractors are quite smooth, actually, Johnny.
Yeah.
18 points. Okay,
smooth.
Let's look at both sides of the coin then, right? So Thomas Frank ended up with a +9 goal difference, scored a heck of a lot more goals than people give him credit for, and finished 18 points ahead of Spurs. Okay, so I'm just, if we're going to...
And for how much of a great tactician
you can't have it both ways.
Over the 2 years, didn't beat Ange, despite him being a great tactician.
Can't have it both ways. Can't have it both ways.
No guarantee a new manager will succeed. No. Then what? My big sticking point is I just feel like this next season for Ange Postecoglou is pretty much about, can he find a way to finish respectably high enough in the league? I don't think anyone's expecting him to win the league or anything like that, unless I guess we did do what Manchester United is doing, buying in Mbeumo, Cunha, all these players. I think it's just about finishing higher up the league and then still pushing for another trophy. If he can manage that, then, he's shown that he is actually made of, the good stuff. If he doesn't, and he ends up still finishing very low in the league, and maybe we do get knocked out of a cup competition pretty early, then, we'll see, maybe people will feel like they've been proven right on the guy. I just feel like we have to give him that chance to see if he can compete on all fronts next season. I think that's a fair marker to judge him by, because, he's shown that he can prioritize a competition, but this next season is about whether he can compete, in all three. And then we might, find out if we do need one that can do that. But with Daniel Levy, you never know. Sometimes you're not given the opportunities or maybe the material to be able to compete in all competitions. And Ange then just chose to prioritize one. Eddie's saying people are acting as if he went out there in the second half of the season telling his players to lose. It just shows how shit our backups are. Anybody want to come in on that? I mean, we knew since kind of the players were even saying themselves, though, like in the new year, the manager did say, we're going to look at this competition only. So it was kind of agreed upon throughout the whole dressing room that the Europa League was the competition they were focusing on.
Yeah, but he built this squad, right? If he says this is where I'm going to come back on him and not be Ange in for the next 3 minutes, I'm going to be Ange out.
Protractor, Sean, protract.
He built the squad, right? He's had 15 new signings. So
4 windows.
Yeah, in 4 windows. This is his squad. If he's saying that the squad isn't good enough, And he, by the way, he was okay with the, if we're supposed to take him on his word, which I've stopped doing because he says everything. And if you say everything, then you're going to get something right. And people will forget everything else you got wrong. But he said that he was on board with the youth project. He said no player comes through this door unless I'm okay with it. So this is his squad. And he's basically saying that the B team or the rotation or whatever isn't good enough to be able to compete on multiple fronts. Well, whose fault is that? You approved all these players, and by the way, you vetoed Eze. So, like the player that we all want now, everyone in the fan base. I do a lot of polls. I've done a hell of a lot of polls. I did one on do you want Eberechi Eze to come to the club? It was the only poll I've ever done that was 98% yes. So everyone wants Eze, and he's the only guy who said no because he had a hard on for his boy Conor Gallagher, who didn't want to come here anyway. He's talking about misreading the fan base when it comes to the Man City game. I think he misread the entire environment when he thought that Chelsea player who's Chelsea through and through was going to come to Tottenham. I don't know. Like I think that if he's saying that we're going to prioritize the first team should be prioritized for the cups, fair enough. But we do have a squad that he built, and he's basically saying that squad isn't good enough. That's on him, in my opinion.
We'll see this next season whether he's even given a good squad or a bad squad. Like I said to Dave, in the back end, I think you just have to see whether he can manage with whether it's his squad, not a squad, whether some of his players were his signings, not his signings. He has a third opportunity here to see if he can compete on all fronts. And that's just how I see it. Eddie, I think I'd like to give him that chance. Artist T saying Sam is a new man. 2 panel shows now where his room has sun and not a pitch black room, but he still sits miles away from the camera, arms folded. I think that's just how we've always gotten to know you, Sam.
Well, to be fair, in my defense, I pulled my Johnny Hammy on Sunday, so I've got to have my leg elevated at the moment. But to be fair, I'm my own man, and I will not be swayed into sitting closer to the camera. So I appreciate them always taking. I laughed before we came on air. I said to my brother, it's funny, like I've got light in my room now and there's people in the chat that keep making comments about how I'm always in the dark. So now I've got a bit of light on me.
The Europa League. Lordy, he's seen the light.
Hotspur summer. He's seen the glory. He's seen the sun. Phil P saying, Dave, I still am waiting at the Airbnb. Call me later.
Yeah, look, you'll be waiting. Unfortunately, I never made it out to Bilbao. In fairness, though, Phil P, if I did get out there, he was going to sort me out with somewhere to sleep for the night, so I wouldn't have to be like some of the other fans who, fair play, were sleeping on the floors of bus terminals and everything else. Absolute legend.
Phil P's body is still in Spain, but his mind is still in Spain, but his body is sadly back in London. Big up, Phil. And the Fazzy Radfar saying, statistically, if the back five started all the games, we would have been second.
What?
Johnny holding the rage.
Oh, that's
Johnny,
logic. That's
I
logic.
think this is back at you.
That's logic if ever I heard one. If my grandma had balls, she'd be my grandfather.
Don't talk about balls, Johnny. We discussed it.
Balls are out. Sorry.
Faz, appreciate you, man. Thank you for the support. And then DB, good to see you back in with us. I'm triggering him with some of my comments about giving Ange next season. I know DB is firmly on the Ange Postecoglou out. We're still persisting with these conversations. With Ange, it just never goes away. Be nice to get some sort of clarity from the club at the end of the day.
You can still be Ange out, but you can still not just panic and knee-jerk. You can still sit there and make sure the right option comes along. You know what I mean? It's just like, but let's not all sit there and start fawning and pulling the cheeks apart of Frank and getting our tongue stick deep in there. Like, I mean, honestly, it's embarrassing. We're Tottenham Hotspur. We had 250,000 people at a fucking parade. You know what I mean? Someone like Thomas Frank, it's an even bigger risk than Ange Postecoglou, and it's just absolute madness. Like, we can sit here and go no to Thomas Frank, still be Ange out, and go, we should be going after this guy or that guy. You don't have to be Ange out, but anybody else in will do. Because I'm sorry, it's just not the case. We got to that point with Jose Mourinho. We brought in Nuno. How did that go?
I think DB though is he's been kind of saying he just wants him gone, but you would people say I would get him on a taxi out of here, get him on a Greyhound out of here. DB though at the same time is saying I'd buy him a nice limousine, bottles of champagne, and give him a nice thank you. So it's not really kicking him out the door. It's just sort of guiding him to the door, I guess. In DB's case, he's still very thankful for it.
I think Johnny wanted to come in there.
Yeah, sorry, Johnny. I'm
just going to say, sorry, I'm talking far too much. I was just going to say, I do fear that whoever comes in, and I mean whoever comes in now, the Ange in and half of Australia. I've had to abandon any hope of going to Australia in the next 18 months.
Did you not do your apology tour? That would soften the blow.
No, I did that. I did that. I said I would congratulate Ange Postecoglou and say well done, and that's exactly what I did. And then what happened? I had all the Ange out crowd said, "Oh my God, even Johnny's flipped." No, I hadn't flipped. I said I would congratulate him, and so I would. But I fear the overreaction to Thomas Frank, like, you know, he's the worst manager that's ever set foot in Britain. But I fear that any manager that comes in now, that's, you know, from the Ange in crowd, who are vehemently Ange in, I fear that any manager, and that's Xavi, that's Glasner, that's just about any manager, unless it's someone really left field, you know.
I'd give Glasner a go. You know, if it was a name that was put forward, you know, of a certain stature or whatever, you know, I'd be okay with giving it a go. And I think genuinely most Spurs fans would go, do you know what, Ange? Thank you very much. You know, let's move forward, you know, a different direction, different style of play and all. But I think what you're seeing is for years, many people were moaning, saying Spurs fans have no standards. And the minute they apply the standards to someone like Thomas Frank, now all of a sudden it's being blown up that we're not going to give anyone a chance. No, I think people have realised how big we are. They've looked at the numbers at the parade. You know, it's woken people up and going what we can be. They understand that there's a massive quality gap in terms of the squad and manager and everything at Tottenham Hotspur, the teams we're going to be competing with this year. And just not any ordinary guy is going to do it. It's going to take a player, someone of a certain calibre. And I think you put that name forward. I think most Spurs fans, bar, you know, maybe Eddie out there, staunch Ange in and stuff like that, would probably shake hands with it and go, do you know what? Right way forward. But I think when you're putting names that are maybe a sideways step and an even bigger gamble, and all season long people have had to hear about this about Ange and that about Ange, and then all of a sudden the excuses for Thomas Frank to get the job, I think many people are going, well, hang on, that's hypocritical. Like me, the first thing I seen, I'm like, well, that's completely hypocritical.
Yeah, but you know what? You know what? When I mentioned Glasner, after he left Eintracht Frankfurt, people just said, "Are you fucking joking? Yeah, fucking Glasner." It's the same. As
I was like that a few months ago. By the way, I ordered the Spurs analyst an apology on that because he put Glasner forward, and I started laughing at him. But I've given time and evidence, you know, and this is where people say I'm wrong. I apologize, analyst. He's a good. I like Glasner.
But this is my point. You know, we're so quick to judge. Now, I've always rated Glasner, but, you know, I was surprised he went to Palace. I thought he would get a bigger job. And I remember, I said this to Sean earlier, I was at Spurs as a guest, and Eddie Howe was in the West Stand as a guest of the board, and he was walking around, and all I could hear was, "Oh my God, Eddie Howe's here. We don't want him as a manager. What has he ever won? He's a small-time manager. We got to think big. We don't want him." This is while he was out of work, right? And what I'm saying to you is, I think we rush to judge somebody. Sometimes managers have to be given the chance to prove themselves before they can. We had it really with Eddie Howe, not so much with Glasner, because Glasner won the Europa League with Eintracht Frankfurt. Maybe Thomas Frank or some other manager needs that step up in a level to be given it. I mean, I look at Italiano at Bologna. You know, look what he's done. He's gone in there and he's won the trophy, beat Inter Milan in the Italian Cup final, one of their biggest trophies in their history, playing with kids and also Rans. You know, there are quality managers out there, but when we look at it in isolation, we feel that as a club that none of these managers are good enough. And we've been spoilt to a certain extent when we've had the likes of Conte and Mourinho and Poch, who have all, as you said before, have all failed if we're measuring failure as not winning a trophy.
Well, that is what Spurs fans said. That is the barometer Spurs fans set the failure on the club on, let's be honest.
Do you not think there's also like a little bit of another angle here, potentially, that within the Ange in faction, that a large slice of that are very recent Tottenham fans that have followed Ange either from Scotland or from Australia, and that those guys will likely follow Ange to the next the next job. So there's that slice that you don't have to necessarily worry about with Thomas Frank getting the reaction, because those fans are kind of temporary Tottenham fans. I'm not saying all Australian fans, but I'm just saying some.
It's the same thing with Jose and Conte, right? There's a huge,
100%.
Stand group that follow them, just anywhere they go.
100%.
I remember that was the case.
And I think the other element, I do think that there is an element of the Levy out crowd who are Ange in because they predict that Ange will be sacked. And then when that happens, if that happens, then that can be the catalyst to get the pressure back on Daniel Levy, because currently all of that thing is in hiatus because he's just won a trophy. And so it's not really a time to be pushing the Levy out narrative. But if the decision is made, then you'll start hearing that saber rattle again.
Maybe we just go around the panel on this one, and then might have one more question that we could have time for here. Your dream manager, if there is one. Of course, probably want to try to be somewhat realistic about it if you can. But if anyone did have, a dream manager that they think is potentially, doable this summer, feel free to go ahead. Johnny, might just go back to you then, since I know you might be the strongest Ange out amongst us. So who would you like to replace?
I want the board to think about who we're going to apply here. Look, I ain't going to make any bones about it, right? All the people who are around Gin, who aren't Australian and aren't Scottish, right, from Celtic, none of you wanted Ange Postecoglou when he signed, right? You all had a whole list, and for 95% of you, he weren't on it, right?
Yeah, okay. I loved that list that we had, actually.
Yeah, you loved the list, and he weren't on it, right? And you all were up in arms, okay, about who's this guy? You loved him for the first 10 games, and then it fell off a cliff, and you were all bitching and moaning, and we've had 34 defeats since then. But now he delivered that cup, and now you're in love with him. So just take it that it's possible that someone you dislike, who might come in, whoever it may be, could also deliver and take you to the land of milk and honey. It's possible. I for myself, I think Glasner's probably the only manager right now that could appease this fan base. And that, pardon?
Nagelsmann would appease the fan base.
Yeah, and Nagelsmann. Other than that, I'm not bitter, mate.
I'm Nagelsmann, guys.
Mate, Lee, I'm not bitter, mate. I'm not bitter at all. I'm happy we won.
Is it Nagelsmann in kind of the unrealistic category, since he does have his job with Germany at the minute?
Yeah.
So, sorry, that again? Sorry, I missed that.
No, I was just saying. I think it's hard to find ones that are realistic, because then you're looking at a pretty bad group of managers, to be honest. And then the ones that are potentially realistic, I don't know. It's a hard balance to strike between unrealistic and realistic, because you don't know what Spurs are capable of. Maybe they can pay 10 to 12 million and get him out of there, right? You never know. Sorry.
Well, listen, if you got say, for example, the Saudis and the Qataris came in, right, with untold money or huge amounts of money, and they went to a manager and said, look, forget Tottenham of old. This is a new project. The Qataris on board, massive amount of money, Champions League football, and this is the project. Then you're throwing the money down on the table, then everything is possible. But if it's going to be just smoke and mirrors and the same business, resumed, where we're buying loans, we're getting loans and opportunities, then no, we're going to be attracting, other players, wrong players. I mean, De Zerbi, he would end up strangling Levy within probably 6 to 8 weeks. Italiano, again.
He's just taking a new job. Yeah, that'd be hard. Because he came from Fiorentina. Italiano came from Fiorentina just this last season, and then he moved to Bologna. So
and
that'd be hard.
Very successful, but money talks, people walk. So.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, sounds like Glasner is your man. I mean, Sean mentioned Nagelsmann is kind of a guy that would give him a stiffy in the morning, like Dave spoke about, maybe 30 or 40 minutes.
Other than
go.
Yeah, no, I take Xavi. I think Xavi's more realistic. He's out of work, isn't he? Even Thomas Frank's going to cost you £10 million in compensation to get him out of Brentford, £7 million to Ange Postecoglou, where Xavi's not going to need anything. So, like I say, I've still got my reservations about that, because there is no perfect solution. Certainly not one that's that's chomping at the bit. The only thing I would say, just last point, is if you're in the Ange crew and it's one of those, I don't have conviction, I'm not that confident, but I think he's earned it, and we'll see where we are after 10 games. I think if we're looking at a relatively dry managerial market now, just wait until September, right? If you need to sack him after 10 games because it's been a terrible start and we're 2 wins out of 10, and then you go, well, sorry, it's not working out, you're sacked. Where do you go then? Everyone that's any good will be employed at the start of the season. No one's leaving at the start of a season. So you're going to go with whatever scraps are left, after the Club World Cup or something. And I'm like, that's another consideration here that, if you're going to back him, then you kind of have to go for it, because you're not really going to get until January. Probably there might be a bit of an opening up of the market, but really the time to change the manager is in the summer.
100%.
Yeah.
I think we've sort of maybe missed that mark. I put a list of names into a group chat yesterday. I put Ancelotti, he's gone to Brazil. You Gasperini gone to Roma. You know what I mean? A lot of the managers have already sort of made their changes. The other ones you're looking at is maybe De Zerbi or that guy Michel at Girona has done a great job there. But again, you're going to pay a fee and stuff like that. And look,
could that be in Ange's favour? Could that be in Ange's favour, Dave?
But look, it could be. I think what was in Ange's favour and ultimately carried him to the chance of being able to, even the fact that we're here having this debate whether he should be kept on or not, is the fact when we had all the injuries and everyone was calling to be sacked, no manager was ever going to sign their name onto this with the amount of injuries, because they're never ever going to get off to a good start, be able to stamp their style of football, etc., etc. They're just going to be papering over cracks and chasing all season long. So they're never ever going to sign on that dotted line. But look, I think if we want to really show ambition, I mean, Jurgen Klopp, he's got to be bored at this point. You know what I mean? He wants to be back out on that dugout, on that touchline. He wants to be on the grass. He wants to be out there screaming and shouting, taking his frustrations out on referees. He doesn't want to be up in the Red Bull, sitting there in the offices and shit like that. You know what you are, Jurgen. You're a manager. You're a coach. We go and approach him. Let's see if we can get him in here.
How much did you pay for him? How much?
Oh, anything.
30 million a year.
Look, I watched that documentary on Amazon about the guy. You look at what he done with what was it, Kuhn or whatever, Kuhn. How do you pronounce it in the German way? K-O-L-N,
the Celtic player. Yeah.
No, the club in Germany that he managed.
Yeah.
Cologne.
Cologne.
And then on to Dortmund, done absolutely brilliant there. And then, look what he done with Liverpool as well. He's had a good, solid career. He changes clubs. He changes their...
Or Mainz, he was at Mainz.
That's the sort of guy you want to be replacing Ange Postecoglou with. Not a Thomas Frank engine. Do you know what I mean?
The managers that I really have a liking to was like what Johnny was saying earlier, that list, of the season where we did in fact hire Ange Postecoglou instead. But that list I was actually really into. I liked the prospect of Arne Slot at the time. I really liked the prospect of signing Luis Enrique. I know Thomas Tuchel's maybe reputation has taken a bit of a hit, but at the time I really did like Thomas Tuchel. I thought they were all like winning managers that have shown that they can deliver success, especially Arne Slot and Luis Enrique certainly have. Whereas now, like, the prospect of the managers that we could potentially get, it's really none of them do give me that stiffy that Dave was talking about earlier. As I think the list from a few years ago did, though, and those guys are now all in a job and, to their credit, have all done very, very well with where they are. So they're now impossible to lure.
What was your list? I mean, my list was
Luis Enrique was actually, I think, my number one choice at the time, when Dave and I were having those conversations. And then it was Thomas Tuchel and then Arne Slot. And I gave reasons for all of them. I was happy with any of those three. And then, the other choices of like Pochettino, the list was pretty good back then, but now I just think all of those are just impossible to bring in. And there's no one new that I'm really that into.
Well, that's what I'm saying. My list at the time, is go back 2 years ago now, was Arne Slot number 1, Clear number 1, Gallardo number 2, and Ruben Amorim number 3. Number 4 was Nagelsmann, and number 5 was Enrique. Unfortunately, Ange wasn't. And the funny thing was that I lived in Glasgow, so I needed football fix, so I became a Rangers fan, not by design, by default, and even when I was down here and I watched the Old Firm derbies and watched Ange destroy Rangers every single game, I never thought for 1 minute, you know what, we need to get that Ange Postecoglou. Even when they signed him, I go, are you joking? How? But, I was wrong. He delivered us a trophy.
Yeah, maybe you were never meant to love Ange, Johnny. Sam, Sam, did you just haven't given your dream manager if you do have one?
I don't really have a dream manager, to be honest. Like, I like the look of Glasner. In parts of the season, I was interested in Iraola, but I think that his end of the season kind of put quite a lot of doubt on that. I think that there's a lot of flip flopping in the Spurs fan base, right? And I'm sure it's the same with I'm sure it's the same with every club, right? I'm not just calling out Spurs, but I don't care about any other club. I'm talking about my club, right? There was on Twitter 4 months ago, every post I saw was like, Iraola's the guy. And now I'm seeing people saying that, like, nah, Iraola's not the guy. He was never the guy. People who were saying that Ange should have been sacked like after the first few games of the season. He should never have been given the second season. Now 50% of the Ange in crew is probably 90% of those people after he won the trophy. And I look at what he said after he won, which was, if you thought that I didn't know what I was doing before I won the trophy, then one game shouldn't sway you. And for me, it hasn't, right? But as we've said, I'm not opposed to potentially keeping Ange, but my problem is I don't see, as much as I want to believe that the club will change, I don't see the Spurs board members, Daniel Levy, etc., making the required acquisitions in terms of playing staff and even coaching staff to basically give Ange the tools he needs to succeed, right? So if they could guarantee me like they'd actually invest and get him what he says he needs, rather than the sort of half truths that he says in the media that he's happy with the players that were coming in, then I'd be all for Ange to stay, right? Because again, I'm not desperately Ange out, but as I've said before, I mean, obviously the trophy softens a lot of my hardness towards Ange, but I still don't know, if he would be the right guy to take us forward. But then, I look at other teams, even Frank, right? I think that Frank's getting a bit of a hard rap because he's basically, we've seen in the last few years how difficult it is for teams coming up from the Championship to stay in the league. And Frank took that Brentford team that, had a bunch of players that you'd kind of heard of, the likes of your Ben Ramas, your Ollie Watkins, etc. at the time, and has turned them into, a kind of a Premier League household name at the moment. They're stable. And I know, Dave, that you were saying it would be a massive risk to appoint Frank. And I'm kind of just playing devil's advocate with this, right? I'm not necessarily saying Frank's my guy. I'm just saying, like,
there's a lot of you people in the skies out there who say Frank's not my guy, but I'm going to argue for him. Like, if he's your guy, just come out and say he's your guy. If not, don't argue for him.
Yeah, but Ange isn't my guy, and yet I'm advocating potentially for Ange to stay, right? What I would say about Frank is that I don't necessarily think he's a risk. I think he's a safe option, because I don't think that he'll come in and first of all, he's not gonna, rock the apple cart or whatever the phrase is. He's going to basically do, I reckon, as he's told, because he's used to working on the kind of budget that, gets Daniel Levy, wet down there, as they say. But he's also good at developing young players. We've seen a few good players come through there. But at the same time, he, from what I see, he builds his team on a strong defense, and he gets a lot out of his wingers. And I've questioned Ange's ability to coach a defense. I know that, the argument about having his top five his top back five obviously does look good, but we only saw a small sample size of these players this season, for example, right? And look, I agree with you guys. I'm not sure who it was that said it, that we've got probably our best back five in years. You know, whether or not you think that Vicario needs to be upgraded or not, defensively, in terms of those actual outfield players, we have a great back four there. And I've questioned Ange not rotating as much when we needed it. And it's funny because I look at, I know everyone's got their opinions on Dragusin, right? But I look at players like Milenkovic from Nottingham Forest, and everyone's like, oh, Milenkovic, he looks like a serious player. But I would wager if you put Dragusin into Nottingham Forest team, everyone would be saying the exact same thing about him. So I want someone to come in. I don't have a preference on the formation. I don't have a preference on necessarily the style. I don't want to see us, revert necessarily straight back to Conte ball, because as I've said a few times, like, that Conte period was very difficult to motivate myself to travel the hour and a half to the stadium. But I'll get behind anyone, right? If they give Ange season, if they give Ange another season, I'll grit my teeth and I'll bear it, but I'll be behind him. But again, I don't have any specific manager that I look for, but I just need the club to actually, buck their ideas up, or we could end up in the same position in 2 years where, we're thinking, oh, if we don't win a trophy now, we're going to get left behind by the rest. We'll already be left behind by then. So,
just on the Thomas Frank thing there, and I know I'm getting hung up on this because I truly believe he's not the right guy, but people make out what Thomas Frank has done at Brentford is unbelievable. I mean, I'm not being funny. Chris Hughton brought Brighton up. He stabilised them in the Premier League. It's not like I haven't seen managers do this with teams before. I remember when Reading came up. Who was it? Steve Coppell, someone like that? You almost got them into Europe. Let's stop going on. Like, what Thomas Frank has done here is absolutely an unbelievable job. I've seen it done before. There's plenty of clubs in the Premier League now, that have come up over over a period of time and been able to sustain their stuff, and stuff like that. Look what Nottingham Forest have done. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, how much of it also do you have to factor in that Brentford's recruitment model is very similar to Brighton's. It's by the same ownership who used to, share the same club and stuff like that. And they generally get a lot of it right. Don't get me wrong. I'm not just saying Thomas Frank isn't a good manager, a good coach. He is. But for what level? We're talking about levels here in this game. And I'm sorry, but for me, we can sit here and say he hasn't been given an opportunity, but how much of that is down to his counter-attacking style of football to a certain degree? Eddie Howe got his opportunity, but at Bournemouth, he tried to play an attacking brand of football. He didn't care about, counter-attacking and stuff. He wanted to play a certain brand of football, and that's what got him his job at Newcastle, and he's been able to replicate it. But, I think you bring in someone like Thomas Frank, you're getting yourself into a situation with Nuno where you're almost asking him to bring, come up with this style of football that's going to help appease the fan base that they're just not known for. And for me, I just think it's a huge mistake. Look, I want the club to clarify one way or another. It does look like, for me, from what I'm seeing around, that it does look like, this is going to come to an end. But I just urge Spurs fans, let's just not jump on the first name. And look, the thing is, people could say, I'm giving Thomas Frank a hard time. All I'm doing is holding the things that you've aimed at Postecoglou this season that you've all said isn't good enough, and I'm applying it to Thomas Frank. And that's the reality of it. And Thomas Frank doesn't meet the barrier that all of us have set around Ange Postecoglou this season. So for me, it's clear that he's not the guy. You need to go and look in a direction and a guy that's really going to take this forward. And it's about what's best for this football club. Forget about Ange Postecoglou. He's only a temporary manager, whether he lasted beyond this summer or whether, or not. The reality is he's going to go at some point. It's what's best to kick Tottenham forward. And going to the likes of Frank and people like that is not what's best to bring this club forward.
Well, let's be honest.
Long hair. Yeah.
It's about his hairdo. It's nothing about his football. We all know it, Dave. You got to come clean, mate. When he signs up,
it's too progressive for Dave.
When he signs up very soon, right? I can see you just falling in love with Thomas. I can see it.
Look, the reality is, right? The thing is, if Thomas Frank comes in, I'm just telling people this now, so they don't say, Dave, you're flip-flopping. If Thomas Frank comes in, I will look and I would give him every opportunity and I'll try and see what he's trying to do. You know, and even if fans are saying, oh, this isn't good enough, I'll say, look, this is what he's trying to do and stuff like that. I will give him every opportunity. I'm not going to sit there from day as soon as they appoint him, chain myself to the gates of Tottenham Hotspur with Levy out. Or sorry, not Levy out, but, what's his name? Fucking Frank out tattooed across me and holding Simon. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give him an opportunity. But I do think we will be making a massive mistake by doing that. I think we want to go and take a step forward. There's a way of doing it.
Well, everybody, I think that's what we found out is Johnny was never meant to love Ange, and Dave is an anti-long hair person.
And I'm not a fan of guys with long hair. I will admit that.
That's what we can
it's
take
just been
from this.
reported that the Thomas Frank deal has been signed, sealed.
I thought you were going to say vetoed. I thought maybe they've been listening.
No, I mean, listen. Who knows?
At the end of the day, we're European champions. The Ange conversation is done now for a day or two, and we'll see what pops up over the next few days. But look, we'll go around.
Yeah, we'll start plugging some stuff.
Yeah.
Sean, I have yours in first. I'm also putting in Football Link. You know, you guys did a stream earlier today.
Yeah, get on the Football Link, please, guys. If you're
doing it
there,
right now. I put it in earlier, but I'm putting it in again.
That's our new channel. You look like a rabbi there, Sam, for a minute. Sean and I's new channel. If you get a chance to go in there, if you like football and you don't want to just talk about Spurs, Football Link's the channel for you. All things football, whatever the club.
Yep.
Put in the second link there. Please, everybody, follow them over. They put in. They're giving us an hour and a half, of their time out of their evenings. They're also got done with a stream earlier. So if you want something else to watch after this, you can head right on over to Football Link, please. But thank you both. Another great show, and thanks for giving up your time this evening, lads. And also, Johnny, I'm putting in your Instagram and
I want to say to people, really do appreciate it, because when you're on loads of different channels and you're being asked to talk about the same thing over and over again, it's not easy. So thank you guys for coming this evening and hashing out points I'm sure you've talked about the last few days. Really appreciate it.
It's nice to spend some time with some sort of relatively unusual faces. Johnny and I've heard Johnny talk about the same things maybe 1,000 hours. Johnny's heard me say the word. It's good for the pivot, and I've said the phrase. It's good for the good propaganda. I don't think Johnny ever thought he'd hear that phrase as many times as he had in the last 5 days working with me. It's ridiculous. We spend too much time together, Johnny. But I love you, buddy. I love you.
Actually, I missed something though. Faz is right. Sorry about that, Faz. Dave, you just take it.
He says Johnny repeats numbers 34, 22, and 17. And he's saying, why won't you repeat 41 years without European trophy? The drought that he's ended.
41 years. I have said that, 41 years.
Yeah, fair you have.
Listen, I was crying from the 80th minute inside that stadium, right? Make no bones about it. It was a fantastic evening, and I'll never, ever forget it. And when Ange, that's the great thing about football, isn't it? However bad this season was, every single one of those players and Ange Postecoglou, if they walk into that stadium, the Spurs stadium, in 20 years' time, they will be applauded, they will be lauded. And I'm sure at some page when they finish their careers, they'll be showing fans around and they'll be wheeled onto the pitch as a leg end because half of the leg ends that were pulled onto the pitch for the Guard of Honour, against Brighton will sadly no longer be with us, and they'll be replaced with players like Cuti Romero, Mickey van der Ven, and the likes.
Can I just ask you one quick question, guys? Is there any bigger candidate for Piss Take of the Season award than Serge Reguilon being second in line to pick up his Europa League winners medal?
Yeah, that is an absolute piss take.
I completely forgot he even existed for like a good 2 months, and I like Sergio Reguilon, but I forgot he even was on the team. I thought he was at Man United or something still.
Yeah. Unbelievable. I still can't get over. First of all, it's shameless that he even got a medal, considering he wasn't part of either of the squads. Yeah. Second of all, the fact that he was second in line. He must have thought, right, if I'm down the back here, I might not get a medal, and they probably won't go and get me a spare one. Whereas if Romero's at the back and he doesn't get one, or Sonny, they'll at least go, I need my medal. I need my medal.
Yeah.
DB saying Timo Weenie also getting a medal as well.
I know.
What's a piss take? Sam, thank you as well for giving up your time this evening, sir. I put in your Twitter. Any final words from yourself there?
Yeah, look, I mean, those at least 3 days, I feel like it's typical Spurs that, we're 2 weeks from winning the Europa League, and everyone's starting to get at each other's throats again about their opinions on whether Ange should stay or the players are good enough, etc. But this is our club. Everyone loves our club.
Yeah.
You're not watching this channel unless you're some Arsenal fan who's trying to hate along. But at the moment, that they're in hiding. I hardly even see any of my mates at the moment, because every time I do, I'm just singing, "We're on our way, we're on our way." And I'm trying to concentrate at work, and people are telling me things, and all I can hear in my head is Johnson again, ole, and I feel like we haven't really enjoyed it as much as I feel like we deserve to. I mean, we've waited. I've basically waited my entire footballing career of watching it, and people have waited 4 decades to see Spurs lift a European trophy. Some clubs that wear red have never seen that. So, I'll wear my scarf even when it's 50 degrees outside. I'll be there, sweating my bollocks off and disintegrating t-shirts because I'm so hot, but I'll keep it on.
Imagine how good it would when we smash PSG.
Well, I keep seeing people saying online, like, it would just be so Spursy if we end up beating that PSG super team. And I'm trying not to get sucked into it, but it would.
The Europa League team usually wins the Super Cup.
Listen, let me tell you something. We're going to have a new coach, and we're going to park that coach right in front of the goal. Job done.
I thought you were saying a new coach because Ryan Mason, invert the wing, has left the club now. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, obviously, big up, lads. It's a pleasure to be on with you all. And yeah, if you want to follow me over to Twitter and you want to relive part of the final, I posted the last, I think from the 93rd minute, I filmed my POV stand in the stands. If you want to see stress, go watch that. That was, one of the best moments of my life. I got to watch it with my 2 brothers and my dad. And, we were in and amongst, I was sitting behind Pedro Porro's family and in front of Mickey van der Ven's family.
Oh, nice.
And actually towards the end, when they started to do the celebration and the players were going to get their medals, Son's family came and squeezed into the row where everyone had sort of tried to move forward, and they were waiting to go on the pitch. So I give I don't know who it was, his uncle or something. I gave him a big hug, give him a little pat on the back. But yeah, if you want to follow me over to Twitter, I got that Billy T cosign now, so I won't let it get to my head. But if you want to follow me, it's up to you guys. But big up, lads.
No, look, and I think, I echo what Sam says there before we end off. Look, at the end of the day, what we shouldn't do is, because someone's not saying what I want them to say, you're this, you're that, and everything else. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you agree with the opinion or not, they're doing it what they believe is best for this great football club. We won a European trophy. Tottenham Hotspur, a massive club. Go and enjoy the rest of your evening. See you back here tomorrow.
Just quickly as well. Thank you to Fazzy Radfar. Thank you to Phil P. Sorry about that, Faz, for almost skipping your super chat from earlier. Artist T as well. Eddie Joker Davis for the longevity of support. Druzilla, Jacob Anderson, and many others. Thank you guys for all the support, and Dermatron as well. And then also feel free to follow us, on other platforms. Dave and I are trying to improve our likability in terms of the TikToks and the Instagrams and stuff like that. So please follow us over there. Can't miss it. All the links are out there. But yeah, we'll end things off there, everybody. Thank you for a great show. Thanks for spending your evening with us.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
Come on, you Spurs.
Enjoy the weather. Come on, you fucking Spurs. European champions. Come on.